order the Addison Northwest School District full board meeting on April 13, 2020. And I'll just make a couple of comments here about our meeting. Clearly, this is the first time that we'll be on Zoom together. So at the end or later on or afterwards, just send me some feedback about how this goes. We thought that we would do it one way, and a couple of changes have had. This is the most security that we have. RETN is filming this broadcast live and recording it as we are required to do from by the new rules that were set forth for open meeting laws. So I will ask a few things. No one needs to mute themselves, but if you do mute yourself if you're not talking, that would probably be helpful. There's a hand raising mechanism at the bottom if you click on participants. And if you click on participants, you'll see that there's a hand raising item, and that can raise your hand. You can also just wave, and we'll try to organize it that way. We've turned off the chat mechanism for this one. We'll see how that goes. And so I think that's
John.
I think that is it. So
John.
Yes.
Did you say to click on the participants, which I did, and I got a list of participants, but I don't see any hand raising.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. At the very bottom, you'll see.
Thank you. Yes. Next to mute me.
Mute me or raise your hand. Yeah. Okay.
John.
Yeah. So I'm going to make one statement. I want to just start this meeting with an acknowledgement that I thank the district for the work that they have done. A cursory look at the superintendent's report and the types of changes that we've undergone between our last meeting on March the 16th and today is incredible. And I thank the district, the teachers, the staff, the administrators, and everyone for their hard work. It feels like we're kind of at the end of the beginning here, and now we're into a new stretch, and we know that it's likely going to be just as much work going forward. And so we thank you for that, and it's important to start there. So if there is a motion to adopt the agenda, would somebody please make that motion?
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Good.
Second.
Great. Okay, thank you. Are there any discussion?
I have a question. I assume that we need to vote one by one.
Yes. Let's do that.
The same way that we do if somebody's on the phone.
Yeah, we'll roll call themselves. Okay. It looks like.
Sorry, George has his hand up.
Yeah, George.
Sorry, I was just to make your motion.
Okay, thank you. Lori?
There are no bills and director's orders to approve. So
Okay.
we can just cross that off.
Okay.
The finance committee hasn't had a chance. Actually, when it all rolled out on April 1st, everybody knows what was happening. So we're going to do March and April bills together after we've had our first finance meeting.
Okay. All right, thanks. Any other items? Okay. All in favor of the motion to adopt the agenda, please say aye. We'll start. George?
Aye.
Lori? Mark?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Okay, thanks. Who else am I missing? I'm sorry. I'm going to have to write this down and do it a different way.
Keith.
Aye.
Okay. Keith, thank you. And Brad?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Just to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do with open meeting law, Just state your name, okay? Just state your name. So George, would you do so, please? Mark, would you do so?
Mark Koenig.
Christina?
Christina Macklin.
Brad?
Brad Dewey.
Martha?
Martha DeGraff.
Bill?
Bill Clark.
Keith?
Keith Morrill.
Lori?
Lori Childers.
Tom?
Tom Borchert.
Chris Cahart?
Chris Cahart.
Sorry, thank you, Chris. Amy?
Amy Kittredge.
Good. And our student reps, go ahead. Would you say your name so we know who's all on here? Reagan?
Reagan Cahart.
Thank you. Una?
Una Fonte.
Thank you. Alder?
Alder Donovan Cook.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I would like to take this moment to welcome our legislative representatives. We do this every year, and it's particularly important. We thank you for taking the time to come and join us to give us a legislative update. I can start by sort of calling on some people, but is there anybody who would really like to get going? I mean, Diane, I guess you're maybe, would you mind getting us started?
Sure. I just unmuted me. Am I okay?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for the invitation. As you may guess, we've been thinking in the legislature a great deal about the situation and much of the upheaval that's going on. And before we left Montpelier, that final week had a large focus. It was all we focused on was like, what do we need to pass before something occurred that we were going to have to close down, and there was an incredible amount of effort put out there that everybody in every committee was trying to figure out what did Vermont need before we left, who had to pass it, and what has to happen. And of course, since then, so much more has even happened, but nothing more so than for this consideration in this room is where we are with the education fund. And how dramatically the economic revenue impact has had on it at the state level, and we're unclear as to where that's going to be at right now at the local level. But we do know the timing is an issue, and for both the municipalities and for the last payment to the schools, as well as how we're going to cover the state commitment to it. But I think there's a lot of questions, and we're gathering the questions and trying to get a handle around what the money situation is, and then we'll start to react to that in a way that's cooperative. So I am concerned about it because at first the revenues were coming in much lower, but there was the capacity, at least from the state side of it, to be able to cover that gap with what we had in our full reserve and with what we had in surplus, would have more than covered what was looking at the 20. And now I'm just talking about the fiscal year 20 gap. And then within days after that, that has grown to not 44 million, but 88 million in our world of just what we figure. And that's a best guess as to what our lost revenues are that are permanently. It's actually a total of 142 million of what they're predicting, 88 of it being lost from the sales tax and other tax sales or uses that will not be recoverable. But there is, and I've got concerns around the 53 million that is thinking it will come through when we get our rooms and meals and other things come in, which got, as everybody does, has got concerns as to whether or not that number will materialize as well. But there's a commitment to make sure that we do our part, that we have to in 20. This is what voters did to finish off this year. And we'll be able to turn over the piggy banks and some other ways to hopefully end that with what our responsibilities being made. I am very worried about 21, because that's where our attention will go to next. We were almost done with the 21 budget, at least out of the House, within almost hours of us being able to complete that. And now that is all on the way back burner as we first look at So what we've been working on in the committee is to first get our hands around what do we even know about the revenues and their losses in 20? What do we know about what might be coming from federal relief, and starting to get that known? And thank you, Senator Leahy, for some of the great work that he's done, which I'm sure you know about. And then the third is the timing around our fiscal budget as well, because it starts July 1 and the taxes have been moved from April to July. So that creates a timing issue that we won't know until probably mid-August or later as to what we could expect in 21, which there's probably all indicators is that that is going to be as dramatic as what we've seen in 20. So our goal is to, within the next month, do a budget adjustment for 20, figure out what the appropriations piece of it on the recovery piece from the feds, and do probably a short-term 3-month budget for 21, which would be July, August, and September. So then by the end of August, we would know better what 21's numbers are, and then have to pass either another short-term or a full on 21 before October. So that's kind of the sketching of where we're at as far as the dollars. There's a lot more going on. Other committees are looking at other COVID type things that need to be in response to. But this is probably the biggest one that both our committee and more importantly is out of Ways and Means as well is coming through right now.
Okay.
I think I've sent forward to you and to some others at least what the initial first drafts of looking at our questions are around this out to people, and it's pretty dramatic.
Okay. Thank you, Diane. I know that maybe we'll hold our questions and then we'll ask here at the end. So I know that Chris Bray needs to go at 6:30. Chris, would you like to offer any thoughts about what your updates on what you have?
Sure. So, in the Senate, you serve on 2 committees. My morning committee, which I chair, is Natural Resources and Energy. And that's usually what I end up spending the most of time talking to people about. Afternoon committee is Government Operations, but it's really been sort of stood on its head since March 13th when we had our last full day in the Senate. So on the whole natural resource energy side of things, we did a fair amount of work pretty quickly with Public Utility Commission, make sure no one would get disconnected from any kind of utility service if they couldn't pay their bills, because we knew a lot of people were going to be losing income right away. And all those kinds of services that you count down in the background, we don't think of very often. So drinking water, wastewater, solid waste systems. We did some work to make sure that those things were all in good shape in terms of being able to withstand the kind of pressures around COVID. So that meant things like making sure we had municipal agreements for mutual aid. Some of our water systems in the state are very small, only a couple operators. If you had 2 people out sick, well, who can come over and actually run the thing? Is there a liability associated with that? So we sorted through a fair amount of those kinds of issues. And then on government operations side, we've done a fair amount of, actually a lot of work. And tonight's meeting, for instance. So we did emergency legislation that we passed about 10 days ago, got signed into law pronto, and that was to allow the public meetings like this one to be held remotely and still be legally binding and valid. Includes that recording requirement. That's for select boards and school boards, because you all have some of the most power and influence and the biggest budgets of local boards. We also did some work around elections. So, we have, this is an election year. Primaries are coming in August. To regular folks, that feels like, who knows, you're not even thinking about that yet. But if you're at the Secretary of State's office that runs elections, they have a pretty tight calendar for many, many small steps to be ready to stand up a really robust election that we're all going to feel has great integrity and the kind of thing we count on, that we've always counted on. So we're probably looking at paper ballots for the at least the August primary and maybe the fall general election. We'll have to figure all these things out, but we have a good running start on it in Vermont because we already have roughly 25–30% of people vote by mail ahead of time. So this basically builds on an existing system and says you would just ramp it up. Probably a best guess right now is everyone gets a ballot by mail. You either mail it back in, or for some reason you may want to return it in person. There'll be polling places on election day, I believe. And some people will never actually get that ballot by mail, and we want to make sure that there's always still a place to go and vote. There's others, provisions in terms of deadlines and licensure, and we've been making sure that we don't have any government kind of operations, from plumbers and electricians to wastewater treatment plants, that stop operation because of a permit expiring when we don't really have the means of renewing permits with offices being closed, et cetera. It comes down to things as much as remote notarization. Many people are needing to do things around powers of attorney, wills, estates, and you can't get people together in a normal way to notarize things in person. So it's a lot of things that none of them, for the most part, well, elections are a big deal, right? And public meetings are a big deal. But then there's many other smaller gears that turn on a daily basis that we count on to have government actually do the thousands of things we want it to do. And so we're making adjustments there to make sure that we can still rely on government to be as thoughtful and careful as we count on it to be, but also nimble, because we know that we need to be able to respond and to the emergency. So I think I'll stop there. And
Thank you, Senator Bray.
Yep.
I can. Thankfully, this school district does not have an immediate election, but thank you for the work on that.
Sure.
Maybe we'll stay with the Senate. Senator Ruth Hardy is here. Hello, Ruth. Do you mind giving us an update on what's going on?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, everyone, and welcome to the new members. I see new faces around the virtual table. So welcome to your school board work. It's really important work you're doing, especially now. So thank you for that. I serve on the Senate Education Committee, so I'll just give you an update on my work in Senate Education. I also serve on the Ag Committee if anybody has agriculture questions, but I'll focus on education for you guys. And we started out by, as Senator Bray and Representative Blandford said, we've been working remotely since March 14th, and our committees have been meeting, and now the full Senate and the full House are both meeting remotely, just like you are, and have voted on several pieces of legislation, emergency legislation. But the Senate Education Committee started by taking testimony on basically what is the status of remote learning and continuity of education, and our school districts meeting the essential needs of kids. And so, of course, one of the first essential needs that we wanted to make sure you were all addressing was feeding kids, which turns out to be one of the most important things that schools do, especially during a crisis. And I just want to commend you, Addison Northwest, for doing a superb job with that. I've just heard great things about the work you're doing with the Meals on the Bus and getting kids food. So thank you for that. And if there's anything I can do to help you with any of this, please let me know. But first, food. And the second thing is we took a lot of testimony on special education services and making sure that our most vulnerable kids were being served, even in this really difficult remote situation, just to make sure that special education services were being continued in some way. And we know that this is extremely difficult and something that is really hard to do remotely. And we want to make sure that those most vulnerable students continue to be served. and that there's a plan for after this is all over to do, I'm blanking on the word, but the catch-up work. Sheila, you know what I'm talking about. I can't remember the word for it right now, but there's a word in special education law about basically if kids don't get the services they need, how they're able to be caught up. So making sure that your district and all districts have a plan for that. We also have heard a lot of testimony about access to the internet, and we know that this is a big issue, especially for our very rural districts. Not all kids have good access to internet, and they are now being required to do remote learning. So I know that the Public Utilities Department and some of internet providers have been trying to ramp up the ability to connect families to internet that might not have it. If you have any particular stories or needs, please let me know, because we hope that there will be federal money that comes in that can be earmarked for this. So this is an opportunity. I have told my colleagues that superintendents and principals and probably school boards know to the house which houses don't have internet connection in our state. So we may be relying on schools to help us map out where to connect internet if we get federal funding that might enable us to do it quickly. We more recently have taken some testimony on Act 173, which was the new special education law that was passed a couple of years ago, and what we should do moving forward, because that is a major change in the way that we both deliver and fund special education services. And we delayed it last year by 1 year, the implementation of it. And we are moving toward a second delay in that, so that there's a good chance that we'll be delaying the implementation of Act 173 yet again. We felt like that during this crisis was not the time to make a major change in special education practice and funding. However, I don't think that that would negate any work you've done toward that. So if you have done work toward moving into the Act 173 world, that's not going to be lost. It just means that it will be delayed. We are taking more testimony on that tomorrow in education, and chances are we'll be voting on that later this week in the Senate and then moving it over to the House. Similarly to that, there are still 18 school districts that don't have budgets yet for FY21. 9 of those just haven't had a vote yet, and 9 of them had their budgets failed. Thankfully, you are not among those, so congratulations, and I'm glad that you're not among those. We are looking at some solutions because, as Senator Bray said, having an election during this crisis is pretty much one of the last things people want to do. So the Secretary of State has requested that elections be delayed for at least 2 months, but that puts a tight timeline on for districts getting their budgets passed by July 1. So we're looking at legislation that would basically give those districts their FY20 equivalent budget for FY21, which may not be exactly what they want, but it will mean that they don't have to move forward with an election and that they'll have a budget in place. And speaking of budgets, we'll be looking more broadly, as Representative Lanford said, at school budgets and the situation given the status of the education fund. We may be doing a more universal look at all school budgets, sorry to say, including yours probably, as to what we're going to be able to afford with the education fund. But that is still to be decided, and in terms of how what happens with the education fund and frankly what happens with both student needs and also the ability of taxpayers to pay their property taxes. So that still is a work in progress, and any feedback or information you have at the local level would be really helpful to get to me, because that's some things that we'll be working on in the next few weeks as we're waiting for the House to finish their work. And let me see, I think that, the CARES Act, which is the federal legislation that was passed in response to COVID-19, there is funding in that legislation for K-12 education. I believe the amount that's coming to Vermont is about $32 million. And that, I think, will be distributed based on your Title I funding distribution. So the proportion of money that you get in Title I, which is the federal money for students at risk and in poverty, you will probably get some similar proportion, but that also is still to be determined, and you may actually know more about that than me at this point, but we're still waiting to get final word. I think that's all I have, except for obviously answering your questions.
Thank you, Ruth. Yes, Senator Bray.
We had some conversations at the board with you all in the last 2 years about budgets that might separate out core educational services from all the other services that schools deliver. And if I'm looking, for a little bit of a silver lining to the pandemic, moving through this crisis at the moment, is I think for many, many citizens, it became clearer than ever how crucial schools were for more than just education, proper, in terms of the basic, providing safe educational space for kids, as well as meals, as well as counseling, as well as sports, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm hoping that on the other side of this, we talked a little bit about budgets that would help distinguish one from the other, to help us see more clearly sort of pure educational costs versus, whatever we call them, social services delivered at schools and beyond. And this crisis, that's the silver lining. I'm hoping that we can get citizens in general to, sorry, I'm getting cut off here a little bit on my own phone. There we go. Sorry, that we'll be able to get people to see that value and help fund it more fully without laying it all purely on the property tax. So that's a bigger conversation for the long haul. But I honestly do believe that people that didn't give schools that much enough thought are going to have a broader appreciation once the crisis is behind us.
Thank you. Representative Barong. Yes, Matt, would you mind giving an update, and then we'll keep going here,
Sure.
folks. I know we're past a little bit, but we'll go for a little while longer just to hear this.
All right, I'll keep it quick. So anyway, my committee does not touch on a ton of education topics, a little bit in labor policy, and that's really about the extent of it. We have had Jeff Fannin from the NEA in a couple of times on a labor bill, H805, which is a collective bargaining bill. That revolves around teachers' contracts and how they can seek for employment throughout the period of the contract year. We were supposed to take testimony on it pretty actively the week before. The last week we were up in Montpelier working in the building. Obviously, the COVID conversation consumed a lot of that oxygen. It's just come back up this week, once last week and this week, and so we haven't really taken a lot more testimony on it. I'm not exactly sure if it's going to become a bill that we're going to put a lot of emphasis behind moving. It's still a little TBD. In those conversations, though, with Jeff Fannin from the NEA, he did spend a lot of time with us discussing much of what Senator Hardy was speaking about around the difficulties with shifting to this at-home education model with the connectivity. Teachers are experiencing, it's a whole new environment. It's a whole new way of doing things. So there's a lot of stress and anxiety with the transition, and also having to deal with the home dynamics while you're trying to teach and plan curriculums and whatnot. The internet connectivity portion was definitely a big part of the conversation. It's a little anecdotal, but he told us a story of a teacher that was actually driving 8 miles to work off of Wi-Fi in the parking lot of a bar and restaurant, because it was the only place you could get a good enough connection to actually engage. So those are all things that have been brought to light throughout this. But I think everyone else has touched on it all, so I'd just be repeating.
Thank you. All right, we'll go for about 8 to 10 minutes or so with some questions, and then we'll move along. So it looks like Lori was first.
I actually have a couple, so I'm going to throw them all out. Matt, I have one in particular for you. Don't answer quite yet. Let me throw them all out, okay? I want to make sure that your committee takes testimony from the Vermont School Boards Association with that bill on labor, because we have an opinion. The board members definitely have an opinion. And I wanted to know if anybody is addressing the chart of accounts. Maybe we should push that back as well. That's supposed to go into effect on July 1, and I think our business managers probably already have enough to deal with all this. Maybe we could put that back. And then, is anyone going to address the transportation reimbursement for the meals on the bus? Because right now, I understand that the transportation that we're paying for to transport the meals is not reimbursable, and therefore our revenue is decreasing because of it. And then the last, will the people, when you guys pass the, for the 18 schools that are still without budgets, I hope you'll allow for them to have their own budgets, their own votes when things get safer. Because, communities, they should have some say, even if they're, especially if they're being harmed by the virus. So that's it.
Thanks. VSB, anybody want to?
So
Go ahead.
Well, Matt can take the first one, then I can take the other one.
Okay. To the School Board Association giving testimony on 805, they did the week before we left. I would assume it's been so long since we've really done anything actively with this bill that once we start taking, if it does move forward with any, urgency or conviction, I'm sure we'll take more testimony on that from the individuals and the representative parties that did previously. But if we get to that point, I will make sure that they get on the list to come back in and speak to us.
Thanks. Ruth?
Yeah, so in terms of the chart of accounts, you're right, we did delay that last year after hearing from business managers, and that hasn't come up yet this year, so I can definitely look into that. We haven't heard from business managers asking for another delay, so maybe it's something we need to address, or maybe it's something that's been able to move forward because it's something that can be done remotely. I don't know, so I will definitely look into that, Lori. The transportation funding, my understanding was that the transportation, at least the state aid for transportation, was going to continue as normal, like you were transporting kids, but you're actually transporting food to kids. That was my understanding, that it was supposed to have moved forward normally and that the federal government had provided waivers to enable that. But I can double check on that just to make sure, because obviously you're still running your buses and still have the cost of those contracts, et cetera, and gas and all that. Although the price of gas has dropped pretty dramatically. And then the third one, in terms of those 18 districts, so the provision that we're considering, which would give them 100% of their budget, is based on, they would still be allowed to hold an election if they could do so safely following all of the public health guidance. If they didn't feel like they could hold an election, this is just a stopgap that they would have so they didn't feel pressure to hold an election and put people at risk. School boards can revote their budgets at any time. So if you guys want to do it, because it's fun and all, go ahead. Under current law, you can already revote a school budget at any time. So they would be still allowed to do that. But we're just concerned about the safety of elections, as Senator Bray said, and wanting to make sure that school boards have a budget. Under current law, if you don't pass a budget by July 1st, what you get is 87% of your previous year's budget, and you have to borrow for it. And so there are expenses related to borrowing, and we didn't want school districts to have to incur debt service to borrow for their budget. So this would allow them to have their prior year's budget, 100% of it. They wouldn't have to borrow. They wouldn't have to hold an election. So it's really just a stopgap. And we wanted to make sure that we were being as cautious and conservative, really, in this, and only giving them 100%, not an inflationary adjustment because of the situation with the education fund. We just didn't think that giving an inflation at this point, when we may have to go back and adjust everybody's budgets, would be appropriate. So they can still hold an election. They can still revote their budget at any time, just like under current law. But that was our thinking on that. I just want to add one more thing that I remembered after I spoke, which was this morning, legislators, including the 4 on this call, were on a call with CSAC, with the Counseling Service of Addison County. And there was some concerns there about school-based mental health service contracts and whether or not they would be continued to be honored. And what I have heard is that all of Addison County school districts are continuing to honor their mental health contracts with CSAC. I'm assuming that's the case, Sheila, but if it's not, let me know.
Yeah, I wanted to also clarify on the transportation. We have not actually received confirmation yet. So there's been talk of waivers, but we've not heard anything conclusive. So,
okay.
And then to confirm, we've been told to expect about 80% of our Title I funding in CARES, which is $155,000, which doesn't stretch very far at the point you have to put that against transportation costs for food delivery and other unexpected, things that have come up as a result of this crisis. So just putting that out there.
Okay, I will check on the transportation thing, because I think you should still be getting your state aid for transportation. But if that's not the case, we'll find out.
Okay. We'll try one more here, make sure. Una, you had your hand up. And then
yes. All right. I have 2 questions. The first of which, with the budget insecurity due to coronavirus, as well as the fact that with this pandemic, certain things like school closures that districts may be experiencing and worrying about budgeting are the back of people's minds. I was wondering if per pupil equalized spending could be suspended for a year. So in order that schools can worry about providing for their students and strengthening their communities rather than being penalized for the money that they're spending. The second of which is more for Senator Hardy, and I'm not sure how much the Education Committee can do about this or what say they have in it. As the College Board this year, we know that they canceled the SATs. But the APs are still going on, and when you were talking about special education services, a lot of the accommodation that students on IUPs and 504s receive for those tests were pre-approved for the original format, and now that they're in a new format, while no one knows what the College Board is offering for accommodations, which could be a possible equity issue for students in high AP classes and who are on special ed.
Una, thank you for those questions. Those are really good questions. In terms of the school finance or the education funding, I don't, we had been discussing, as your superintendent knows, prior to this crisis about potential changes in the school funding formula. Those discussions have all been put on hold. Now is not the time to be making major changes in our school education funding formula. So my guess is we'll get back to those next year, depending on where we're at. At this point, the issue with school funding is actually a very broad issue as to whether or not state and local governments will even have money to afford the budgets that have been passed. So we really have to be looking broadly at whether or not we have enough money in our funds to support the education budgets that have been passed already. So changing the formula to a different way of distributing funds right now would probably not be a wise move. And it also would be a really difficult thing to debate remotely. So then in terms of your second question, we are getting some testimony tomorrow from higher education officials, and I can certainly ask about your question. I think it's a really good, interesting question. I knew that the AP exams had been changed, but if they're not providing the equivalent types of accommodation for students with disabilities, and obviously that presents some equity issues. So many equity issues are highlighted, underscored during all of this, but I will certainly see what I can find out about that. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. I know Elizabeth has her hand up, and then I'm gonna bring this part of our discussion to a close. Elizabeth?
Hi. So I just wanted to clarify a couple of the things that we've been talking about in regards to the transportation aid. It's my understanding that in the current fiscal year, our transportation aid for the regular state aid is already confirmed, and those payments usually come alongside of our education funding, which we have been promised those funds will still come because they were already calculated based on our budgets and our spending from last year. What I'm concerned about, and with regards to these waivers, is actually our regular transportation cost for the current fiscal year is what they use in our stat book filing to calculate how much our state aid transportation reimbursement will be next year. And so we already passed a budget with, an estimated revenue of what that would be. And that's the state aid revenue that we have not received any confirmation as to whether or not we will receive it. So that one actually is next year that we're hoping for waivers on, not the current year.
Okay, that's a helpful clarification. Thank you.
Okay. The one transportation that we are losing potentially this year is our reimbursement that goes with our vocational technical center transportation. We also get a payment for that, and that one we've already been reported we will not be getting the full amount. We can only claim the number of days the students actually travel to the tech center on that reimbursement. So that one does hit this fiscal year. And then just to clarify a little bit on the chart of accounts situation, many districts aren't necessarily vocal about the chart of accounts at this point because probably about half of them already transitioned to the chart of accounts either this year or last year, before the deadlines kept on changing. We were holding off because there was still changes happening to that chart of accounts that was uniform. We were waiting for the business rules. And so now we have them, and we were well underway, and we were definitely going to make it for 7-1 had this crisis not happened. Now I'm just starting to feel a little bit of strain about whether or not that can really happen. And it's not just about us and trying to work remotely, which I have to tell you is pretty difficult. I have one primary person that works with me on it, and you can't be in the same office with them. So you've got a couple of different Zoom screens up, and then you've got these massive charts of numbers, and it's pretty crazy. My second concern is, will our software company be able to incorporate everything that we give them by 7-1? So it's not just us, the school district. I think we can get our part done. Even though it's difficult, but it's the software company that we currently use that we will be putting under pressure to get that done.
Thank you. I'm going to say thank you very much to Senators Ruth Hardy and Chris Bray and our representatives Diane Lamper and Matt Barong for joining us. Thank you very much for your participation today. So you all can hang out or you can sign off. But let's move along.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
See you all later.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you. We would stick around. We do have another meeting that most of us we're going to attend next. So have us back. We're home.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move along to our reports. So the first one up is the superintendent report. Sheila, do you have anything that you'd like to add to your report?
Well, I just want to echo what you started the meeting by saying, and that is to thank our faculty, staff, administration, and students during this incredibly difficult time. I mean, when I was thinking back to when did we last meet and what were we talking about, and trying to sort of summarize everything that had happened between that meeting and this, the only way I could do it was by constructing that timeline, which was a helpful way for me to kind of think about how to synthesize it. But I think the most remarkable thing was, just our faculty and staff and administration just rising to the challenge of the moment and really making it happen. And I mean, even when we left the last board meeting, the call was that school would be orderly, dismissal of schools by that Wednesday. And then that night we ended up calling school for, you know, the next day. And that was the beginning of an incredible amount of flexibility, you know, on the part of everyone. And, you know, most of us don't operate well under ambiguous circumstances. And I can't say enough about, you know, just how incredible everybody has been. Everybody just really brought their best to this and worked to solve the problem and problems. And I would say for most of us, we're just sort of transitioning out of true crisis mode into like, okay, it's the new normal. But still we're getting daily guidance from the AOE that we have to read through and think about and respond to. I mean, there were those sort of tier 1 problems that we all had to resolve urgently. You know, the issues around food service, the issue around childcare for essential workers and those pieces, as well as, of course, maintenance of learning and then continuation of learning. But now we're on to that second layer of issues. You know, what does you know, feedback look like for students in this model? How are we responding and wrapping around students for whom we're having trouble reaching in this model? You know, we're down to a new tier of troubleshooting and problem solving, including multiple rounds of reorganizing the work and sending it back out and that kind of thing. So our administrative team meets just about every day to check in and see what issues have come up. I'm also meeting daily with all of the superintendents in Chittenden, Franklin, and Addison County. And there's where we usually go through all of the guidance and think about what the implications are for various things and kind of problem solve those pieces. But we're also then sort of starting, like I said, to look forward and think more about, you know, our leadership challenges, not just the management challenges, the day-to-day management challenges. So it's kind of good to shift into, you know, a new way of thinking about our circumstance. So I tried to list out there in my report the things that we know and the things that we've already implemented, as well as the things that we're still waiting on. I mean, now we know that we are still under the stay home orders for a while longer. We're hearing from the Secretary of Education that they'll be giving us more guidance around May 8 about what the end of the year is going to look like. Up to and including the possibility that we might return to school. That's not off the table, even though the governor's original statement made it appear as if it would be off the table. He reserves the right to you know, decide something different. So I guess we'll just have to see what the trajectory of the virus is at that point. Spring sports, you know, dates when we can all get back into the buildings. And there are some still issues that we're waiting on and with pre-K. There's been some confusion about continuation of learning for students in our private partnerships and how the money's flowing, and we're still trying to sort that out. So that's about it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any questions? Keith?
I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you've done. Having seen my kids interacting with the school system on this end, everything from meal delivery to chorus, band, regular classes, it's been a process of you know, teachers troubleshooting, but it's provided some semblance of normalcy for them. And if anything else, that has been really important to them, just to feel like they can connect. So thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Yeah, Tom?
Wait. Am I good? All right. Yeah. Sorry about that. I certainly would echo Keith's statement and John's from the start of the meeting. What the district has done has been nothing short of phenomenal. You and the teachers and the food service and Elizabeth and her staff. It's remarkable the amount of work you've done in the last couple of weeks. one of the things that I noted and I may have misunderstood what Elizabeth was saying when she wrote this, was that it sounded like you weren't needing, she was able to shift over monies from the substitute teacher line to put it towards other things. And I'm just wondering how substituting is working in this situation, and like what happens with long-term substitutes in the situation of people coming back from maternity leaves and things like that.
So there's a few different answers because you've raised a few different topics. In terms of day-to-day substitutes, we are not currently hiring substitutes to support day-to-day instruction for students. We have more of like a teaming approach. We are fortunate in that we haven't started to really experience the virus, you know, as employers. Like we don't have, we're not seeing a lot of need to even think about that beyond what we have in place. But our staff at the elementary schools, for example, are organized into like teams, and there are other folks that are covering in the event that someone needs to take some time off. You know, and students, and then at the high school level, they're structuring the learning in different ways as well, so that there's kind of a flow to how students are doing the work. So it's different than when you're in the building for 7.25 hours and that person is in the room, right, is missing, where you have to really get that substitute teacher, and we're able to team it differently because that coverage looks different. In terms of long-term subs, anyone that was hired to be a long-term sub was already employed by us as a substitute for, say, the year. They're still subbing for us. You know, that person is still out on leave, and we needed someone to do the maintenance of learning plans and the continuation of learning plans. And so it's that person, you know, that was assigned. We actually only have, I believe, one person in that circumstance in our whole district. So we have one long-term sub right now, providing for planning instruction. So I think that answers your question.
I know Lori has had her hand up.
Hi, thanks, Sheila. Really, I'm in awe. Thank you. And you parents, man. So in the last of your report, it says that Nancy Ambrose has decided to stay. And I was wondering who we had retire or resign from the math department. And I also didn't understand the last sentence that we opened the early retirement again, the incentive program, and 2 people stepped forward, and then it says this results in 2 fewer reductions to our workforce at the elementary level.
So in terms of giving particular names, I'm actually not sure where we're at with those individuals having made public announcements. So I'm a little hesitant to make a public announcement. I'd like to allow those folks some control over how that gets outed and when. But it was another member of the high school math department that resigned. And so it worked out in such a way that Nancy could come back because there was a position for her to come back to. As you recall, we weren't replacing her position otherwise. So in terms of the other piece, the person that the 2 people that stepped forward for early retirement were both elementary educators. So we were able to not RIF 2 elementary folks that were going to be reduced as a result of, you know, our changes. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to move along to the business manager. I usually have these in front of me, sorry. Yeah, the Director of Finance and Operations report. Thank you, sorry.
Sure.
Elizabeth, anything that you would like to add?
I have a couple of things I could say. Just kind of reiterating, everyone's sentiment tonight is just in awe of what this district and all of the employees that are involved in every way, shape, and form have been able to accomplish is really amazing to me. And I don't know that I could have ever imagined that we would be able to pull off what we've been able to do in such a short amount of time with regards to every single item, because it affects every single kind of person doing every single kind of job, whether it's the learning and the food service, but also even, you know, you're thinking about business office staff who suddenly had to pack up their things and work from a home office or a bedroom instead of their normal office, and not having all the things at their hands that they are used to having to be efficient. And the custodial staff basically manning the buildings and trying to clean them, desanitize them, you know, sanitize them. And while still things are happening in those buildings, even if it's not everyday school, there's still the food service programming happening there, trying to load buses and things like that, and then having to sanitize again after that. And so I'm in awe, and I'm so thankful for everybody in the entire district and all the effort they've put in. With regards to the finances, I feel like when I calculated how much revenue we needed to try to kind of offset, and I think it was Tom that mentioned something about, you know, the sub pays, that was one of the lines I used to kind of basically decrease what we would spend in an expense line so that we losing revenue would not overspend. And that was one of the situations, and we only took money to reserve against that wasn't already encumbered, like Sheila was indicating. If there was already a long-term sub or something like that, that's already encumbered. It's not left available in the line. So I only took funds that were available, which would be those short-term sub everydays that we aren't using. And I think that our revenue estimate of loss is pretty conservative, meaning I think we went high with it. But we did that because we are not receiving confirmation on certain revenues, like what we were talking about with transportation. There's not official confirmation. The biggest area is special education. You know, we are providing special education services, but the way in which we're having to provide them is different. And so the costs are different. And as you know, we're currently still on the funding formula where our funding is driven by what we spend. So we spend less because we're not transporting those kids and things like that. But yet that also shows a loss of revenue. So we just have to make sure that in other areas we're spending less also. I think one of the members, I think it might have been Mark, we emailed earlier regarding concerns about spending for the remainder of this fiscal year. In my report, I did mention that we wanted to be very, very conscious and very calculated about what we continue to spend money on, and basically do only non-essential, you know, all non-essential spending just is eliminated. And I think what that means for people, if people are confused by that, it means that this time of year, typically we wait until about May 15th and we start sending out notices that people will no longer be able to spend money that's not encumbered for the remainder of the year, because it doesn't make sense. Usually you will have planned out the remainder of your year, you only have a month left, you wouldn't be spending a ton of money at that time. Well, what I'm recommending is that we go a little further with that. We're starting it now, basically. And we are even pushing it harder to say, really think about, do I absolutely have to have this in order to do the continuation of learning or the food service program, or, you know, whatever the case may be, we absolutely have to have these items. And so we just have all administrators being very conscious of that. And so that's what that meant. And then, of course, we were supposed to have a presentation by Kathy this round for the food service program. Clearly, that's typically kind of an update in a report as far as how food service is doing so far this year. In the current circumstances, she just really felt so overwhelmingly wanting to put forth what we were seeing with success with the program, and how very impressed she was and we are with how they've handled this particular situation. So her focus for her report that she included, and hopefully everybody got to read it, was more on the current situation at hand. But there is some notes in my report about where we're at currently with the whole food service program financially. We are a little bit ahead of where we were at the same time last year, as far as our fund balance, our spending, and our revenues. Not really knowing for sure how the pandemic is going to affect that overall. just being that we are still, fully running a system that we haven't done like this before. We've only used this kind of system and this reimbursement model in the summer, which is not nearly the volume that we're seeing right now. In regards to accounts receivable, I think I mentioned how high that was, and we've already worked on sending out a notice that's going to go out this week to folks, and hopefully drum up some more people to apply for free and reduced meals. If if they're receiving a letter, they're also going to get an application for free and reduced, and we hope that people will take the time to go ahead and take advantage of that and file those reports, because a lot of people are in a very different situation than they were maybe before this all took place.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Elizabeth? I'll start. I'll just say it's remarkable, the report that that Kathy Alexander pulled together, and the move from 400 and something meals to 700, and that seems to be the demand that is out there for these services. So it's incredible. Any questions for Elizabeth or Martha? Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, okay. I have a question about the free and reduced lunch.
Thank you. Yeah.
Obviously that is beneficial, but I do know that many families that are getting it have younger children that are also getting the meals. Is there an age limit? And should we be encouraging, or is it just
So the current Meals on the Bus program is eligible for free meals for absolutely everybody ages 0 to 18. So as far as that part's concerned, any meals that those kids are getting are going to be paid for in full. So that's our summer program, and they have guaranteed us that no matter the age of the child, that we would receive that reimbursement. Now, when you talk about the free and reduced meals, as far as if they have no school-aged children at all, then probably applying for the free and reduced meals wouldn't really do anything for them.
Okay,
right
I didn't know if that was something that.
But if they, it won't help them qualify for getting the free meals for right now, because they're going to get them, they're getting them anyway, and we're going to be reimbursed for those. But if they have school-aged children at all, like say they have one school-aged child and 2 that aren't, they should go ahead and apply for it. Or if they have any children that are coming into the school system next fiscal year, because those free and reduced numbers are used to calculate a number of different things. So it's helpful information for our program to have that information.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I'll continue to move along. Yes, okay, Lori, yes, sorry.
I just want to throw it, I don't know where this goes, but I'm going to do it here. I was going through papers, because that's what we do when we aren't working, and I found a whole bunch of old board stuff, and I wanted to say a couple of things. One is, we've been talking about enrollment since before 2014. I have enrollment forms from 2014. I just wanted to bring that back to the forefront. We also were talking about what the superintendent's office is made up of back in the 2014, 2015. Additionally, I wanted to say, and this is why I broke in here, is because of Elizabeth. I have an email here from 2016 that's talking to, from me to Joanne, talking about how the tax calculation was incorrect, and it was published in the Addison Independent, and it was calculated by our business manager. And I won't say much more than that, except I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm thankful for all of you too.
All right. All right. Let's go to the students. Anything from you all, Una or Alder or Reagan?
Yes.
And I hope you'll send a note to Ben, our other that we he's missed. So let's keep it going. Thank you, Una.
All right. So I will acknowledge my own limitations. That I'm going to start by saying I sent out a survey to the entire student body, or attempted to. Ms. Taylor did not feel as though it was appropriate timing to do so. So I acknowledge my own limitations in the fact that my knowledge of student presence is really only coming from the kids I have classes with and interact with on a daily basis. However, I have tried to reach out and broaden the scope, and my hope is for the next board meeting, I will be able to do that. So what I will say is it's a crazy time for everyone. And in addition to learning what we normally learn in school, chemistry, math, English, what students are really finding that they have to learn is time management skills and learning how to organize your time and be productive on your own without the structure of school, which is a lot to be thrust into. It's good. We're going to have a generation with really good time management skills, hopefully. What I have heard a lot from students is that it has felt like because there's no school day, it seems like work has doubled, and people are feeling very stressed about getting all their schoolwork in and having work for classes that they only had every other day, now every day in some instances. Though I will say what has been amazing is this has ushered in kind of a forced student-teacher participation in which we're all students and teachers are learning how to do this new system as we go. And so teachers have responded mostly to student concerns of too much work. The other thing I will say is in this time of social distancing, school clubs and groups have continued their work. In particular, the Racial and Social Justice Alliance has been meeting twice a week and doing a lot of work around our hazing, harassment, and bullying policy, as well as just looking at what racial and social justice looks like in our school and in the world at the moment, as well as the Environmental Club, which will be having its first virtual meeting on Wednesday. So thank you. I'll try to keep this short as I know we're already over time.
Thank you. Alder?
I just want to say that I think that, you know, we're all sort of aware that this situation sucks, you know, and I think that, like, there are some, like, aspects of the learn from home that are working for me and working for my fellow students. There are aspects that aren't, but I really just want to give a big shout out to the teachers and the administrators who, in my experience, have just been overwhelmingly supportive. And we're all sort of learning to get through this process together. And I've just been really impressed with the flexibility that I've seen from my teachers, because I don't know, if I was a teacher, I would not have been like as on top of things as quick as they were. And it really feels like I'm getting as robust of an educational experience as I can in the situation that I'm in. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Reagan, you okay?
Yeah, I think that the teachers are doing great. They're working very hard to adopt all these new changes, and they're changing their curriculum to fit the needs that they have with this whole new system. And I think that they're doing a really great job.
Good. Thank you, Reagan. Pass along from the board to your classmates our best wishes and hopefulness for them. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go. Wait, Laura, you wanted to add something really quickly?
Yes, just real quick. I'm sorry. I should have asked Elizabeth this. This is for, are we in any kind of cash flow situation if we don't get our April payment? Well, have we gotten our April payment?
So our April payment comes in, we have a special education payment that will be coming this week. That's relatively small. We have our regular education payment that comes in at the end of April. We're seeing that right before that comes in, we are slightly cash short. So we literally will hold one accounts payable check run until that check comes in. That usually comes in via ACH, and we've been promised that that money will come. The concern is beyond the education fund at this point. It's when the towns start collecting their property taxes. We have more payments due to us through that mechanism in May and June. So you know, basically, yeah, as long as we get that education payment on time in April, we're good for now, but we're watching it really closely and talking to the towns and to everybody.
It's my understanding that they don't have a choice. They have to pay it whether they've collected it or not. Is that, that's what I was understanding from the.
That is true. They have to pay it. There's talk about how they do that if they didn't collect the taxes themselves, you know, meaning borrowing possibly on their part. But there's also, I'd have to read the statute, but there's also something that indicates they can pay late and they can pay, or they could pay a slightly lower amount based on the delinquency. At the end of the day, they have to make you whole by the end of June 30th. But that doesn't mean if their payments due to us in May, per se, then that still presents an issue for us, right? If they withhold some of the delinquency for a month or a month and a half.
So you're working on a plan, a contingency plan in case cash flow is.
I'm at least in conversation with them. I've sent out a message. I received one message back from one of the 3 towns that owes us so far. So we're going to be in communication to try to figure that out.
Good. Thank you, Mark.
I was going to say that the I know the city manager for Virgins is working on that and has been in talks with Bank of Middlebury to figure out potential bridge loans, other options. So they are working on it. I don't know about the other towns, but Virgins is planning on doing what it's supposed to do.
Great. Good. Thank you. Let's we'll move along now since we went back, which is fine. Let's go on to board reports. Anything from the Hannaford Career Center? Christina?
I have just 3 short things, but first I just want to say 1,000 thank yous to everyone in our school district and all the work that everyone's doing, and the students that are learning too. So I did meet virtually with the Hannaford board last week. Just a couple things. They're continuing with their distance learning, which you can imagine the challenges there when a lot of what they do is hands-on work, but they're maintaining well. I also wanted to let everybody know that the Career Center sent in their IB candidacy application finally, so that's been sent, and they're in the process of hiring a full-time assistant director and dean of students. And other than that, that's all I have to share.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions? Sorry.
That's a budgeted position, I take it, Christina.
Oh yes, it was. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Christina. Anything from the negotiations committee, George? Where's George? There he is. George, you need to unmute yourself first.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay. We're still waiting on a mediation appointment with the support staff. We've had more meetings with the teachers, but we're slowing down there until after we get our financial report at the meeting on Thursday. So I anticipate we're probably going to meet with them again next week.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Let's move on. Community Engagement Committee. Christina, thank you.
Yes, bet. So we were supposed to meet on April 2nd, and we did not hold that meeting. And prior to, when we met last, we had a plan that we wanted to hold 2 events related to early childhood education and pre-K needs, and then do an event night around middle school model. So with that said, everything has changed since then. We decided to just postpone the meeting and just sort of get feedback from all of you either after the retreat or I guess I want to ask all of you to think about, should we go forward and hold these 2 events in some fashion or another? We could do something remotely through Zoom and gear up for those presentations, or hold up and see where things take us down the road.
So these are some questions that we should think about for the next time down the road, likely even our retreat.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what I'd say is the Community Engagement Committee is definitely committed to trying to engage the community. It's just like, what do we want to do from here moving forward? Do we want to, yeah. So the retreat would be a good place possibly to talk about some of this.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions or, okay. So you can see my board chair report. And I tried to highlight, I received, and I know many of you did, and I'm really trying to get everybody on the board onto the VSBA email list. And so I've tried to work on that a few times. Clearly they're really busy, but they sent out an enormous amount of information for us as a board with lots of changes. So I tried to highlight a few of those things for you, especially the VSBA governance guidance document. So please take a look at that and ask me any questions if you have. And I'll leave it at that. Any questions for me?
John.
Tom does. Yeah. All right.
And this may also be for Sheila as well. It's just about committee meetings. Do we need? I know we need to record this one for the new open meeting law. If we have a committee meeting, does that also have to be recorded? And how do we go about getting committee meeting access, Sheila?
If you go to me and I set up the meeting, I can click the record function. So they're all recorded in the cloud in Zoom. For this particular meeting, I'm not doing that because RETN already does that for us, and they're all archived on the RETN website. But for committee meetings, like policies this week, I've already set it up in Zoom and have set it to record to the cloud for those purposes. So yeah, we can do it that way.
Lori?
So I noticed nobody's taking any notes. So now, how are we going to, how do we approve minutes?
Lori's here. You just can't see her. She's in attendance. She's taking notes. I could even mute her and she could say something to you right now, but I'm not going to put her on the spot like that.
Okay. Thank you. And I didn't get a chance to ask about the negotiations committee. All this has been happening so fast, but the numbers that Ruth and the other legislators were talking about, that and they're talking about looking into our individual budgets. I mean, this is obviously unprecedented. And I just want to say good luck to the negotiations committee. And I wondered if these numbers are going to make any difference.
Don't know yet. We're holding off. The last communication we had from ANT was they wanted to do a Zoom this Wednesday, but we were having the retreat on Thursday, so we asked to hold off until we have a better understanding of the numbers and where we go from here. We had a handful of issues still outstanding, and we're just including salary. So we'll just have to see what happens and guess.
I would expect on, I'm not speaking for the negotiations, but it's the board chair time. I would just ask everybody, just as a reminder, please do, if you have not, take a look at the two documents that were sent out with the agenda for the board retreat. Those are some pretty important macro documents as far as what the outlook is for education finance in the state of Vermont. George?
I actually watched that webinar this afternoon. It takes a little over an hour, and there is a lot of information there. And regarding the negotiations, we are very aware of our dire financial situation, and we're taking that into account.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's continue on. We'll move to the policy committee. And right now, I'm still the chair of that committee. So we do have a meeting on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. And that's it about the policy committee. Anything else from anybody else on the policy committee? All right, good. And facilities, Tom, anything to add to the report?
I don't. I just, if you didn't have a chance to read the report, the one thing that I would say is that when I talked with Ken, he emphasized just, you know, how hard his staff was working in a variety of different ways to support everybody's efforts, and in particular the food service in its transformation. And that in some ways this has been something of an opportunity for them to go into summer schedule early and do some of the summer projects early. So again, in the silver lining category of this thing. So, but that's all I have to say. I'm not, you know, unless somebody has any questions.
Any questions for Tom? Christina?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I was wondering if Ken has had any staffing issues. Like, has that been a problem at all? You know,
Sheila could, yeah, go ahead, Sheila.
Do you mean, what do you mean, Christine? I'm sorry.
Just a lack of staff, like he's been able to.
We've had trouble hiring into his, since the whole time I've been here. So we've had open positions in his department, but in terms of his current staff and who he has available, they're all, I mean, they're accessible, and there are no issues with the staff he has. We just, we've had open positions for a while.
Yeah, I guess that's why I asked. I did know that, and they've been able to keep up with everything they need to, it sounds like, for the most part.
I think that right now this is a nice catch up for them to get to that they're not able to get to. You know, I think they've definitely had to make compromises, you know, as a result of the staffing, and they work very hard. Yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Lori?
Also, just to add to what Sheila's saying, you know, I've had some conversations with Ken also, and as Tom was indicating also, that they've been able to take on what we call, he calls it summer projects, but they're really like the smaller summer projects where they can literally go in and deep clean an entire room. And those kind of things are helpful in this pandemic situation, but also it gets them a little further ahead. And I think the reason why the fact that we're down a couple of staff members pretty much perpetually in that department, that was really a problematic thing all year long. But now with this situation, I feel like it's a little bit more under control for him, because there isn't, you know, the constant traffic in the buildings. The traffic in the buildings is very limited. It's limited to certain days for the continuation of learning. It's limited to the areas where the food service programs are running, which is not in all 4 buildings. So I think in some ways it's maybe a little bit more manageable right now, and there's not all those events happening, you know, like athletics or after school different, you know, concerts and things like that, just pretty much constantly going all weekend long or during the evenings. So I think they're able to really do a deep cleaning and do some little maintenance projects. At the same time, it's a challenge because I think they have to try to stay away from those that are using the building also to do that social distancing. So trying to maneuver his staff in such a way that they are safe while there's other people using those parts of the building too, because we want to keep them safe. They're the ones tasked with having to go around and do the sanitization afterwards.
Well, and to follow up on that, there's inherent challenges in the kind of in the work that they're doing. Sometimes it's very difficult to socially distance when you need 2 people to lift something.
Yeah. Lori?
I just wondered if anybody has any idea why we're having such a hard time filling those positions.
No takers on that question right now. Let's keep on going. Thank you, Tom. We'll go on to action items. Okay. So I've learned, okay, just a couple of things here really quickly. Number one, I didn't mention this, but you can see, if you go to the participants and you see the panelists, we've tried to, and Sheila has tried to encourage those who would just like to watch, view the meeting, not to log in to Zoom, but if someone from the public or someone wants to attend and perhaps may be called on, for example, you can see those others who are attendees. The attendees are over here to the right. They're Andy and Matt and Stephanie and Glory as well. So just be aware of that. We're going to move on to the action items. It's my understanding that if it is a unanimous vote, we do not need to go through the roll call. But if I hear a nay or somebody raises a hand or something like that, then we will do a roll call vote, okay? So that it's properly recorded. So the first, is there a motion to approve hires?
I move that we approve 4 hires as listed in action items A. Randy Sweeney, 1.0 FTE to be school counselor in the middle school. Stacy Raphael, 1.0 FTE English Language Arts in the alternative program. Jeffrey Duggan, my apologies, 1.0 FTE in the STEM teacher in the alternative program. And Nicholas Exler, a 1.0 FTE instrumental at VUEHS.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I can second.
Good. Mark seconds. Thank you. Any discussion?
No specific discussion, but Stacy is a friend, so if anybody feels that I have a conflict, I'd be happy to abstain, but I don't think it really affects me.
You can.
Got a lot of friends on this board.
No, I know. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
It says alternative program. Is there clarification? I'm new,
Yeah.
so.
Sure. Sheila?
So that's the program that we're running next year ourselves that will be at the Addison Central School. So
Okay.
that's the program that we currently provide an instructor for. It's currently housed at CSAC, and Stacy actually is currently on staff. We currently employ her to be the teacher offsite at the CSAC location. And then she's returning into the permanent position. And then we hired a STEM teacher for that as well, a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics teacher as well for that program. And that is our contribution to the alternative program. And there are other staff members that are going to be hired or have been hired by the other 2 districts that are part of our consortium. So these are the employees that we are hiring for the program, and they're hiring other positions.
Okay, I just wasn't sure what alternative program meant. I was looking for that clarification. Thank you.
Sheila, maybe at another time down the road, will you give us an accounting of all of that staff, please? Yep. Thank you. Is there any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passed. Thank you. Is there a motion to authorize the superintendent? The next item.
I move to authorize the superintendent to submit proposals, accept grants, and act as administrator of federal and state programs on behalf of the ANWSD.
Is there a second?
Second.
Christina seconds this time. Thank you. Any discussion about this matter?
So this is just an annual approval where we're required to get your authorization for these items. So this is just something that you do annually at this meeting every year.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. We removed action item C, so let's now move on to action item D, the approving the minutes. Could somebody make a motion, please?
This is George. I so approve.
Thank you, George. George makes the motion. And any seconds? A second? With Brad seconds this time. Thank you. Is there any discussion about the minutes from March? Sorry, I'm going back and forth. From March 13. Excuse me, March 16. So the date on the front is incorrect.
Oh, yeah.
But everything else. Are there any comments about the minutes themselves? Lori?
Yes. Yeah. Can somebody? I wasn't there, but could somebody tell me there was the last motion uses some language that I don't understand, and the quote is the provide budgeted payroll continuity to support staff. What does that mean? What were you guys voting on there?
Okay. Sheila, do you want to start, or would you like to?
I think that was in reference to the COVID-related closure, and that we needed you to approve what the governor had essentially asked of us, which was to provide for payroll continuity for our employees throughout the period of closure. But it didn't feel like I should make that determination all on my own without the board's awareness or approval. So that's how it ended up there.
Thank you. Get back. Any other questions here? Any other comments or discussion about this action item, the minutes? Okay. All those in favor of the minutes, please say, approving the minutes from March the 16th, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Okay. Lori Childers abstains. Everyone else, the motion passes. Thank you. And
so moving on to E, I move that we accept the donation received from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services.
I'll second that.
Thank you, George. Tom makes the motion. George seconds. Any discussion?
I was wondering why this came to us as opposed to one of the other schools, and how this came about.
I'm not exactly sure how the initial contact came in, but I know that Bob Owens, who is in technology with our district, was in communication with them. And I think they just contacted him and asked if our school district could use the monitors. So they were used monitors, a substantial amount of them. And they're all the widescreen version, which actually I have one of them up here on my screen too. So it's really, really wonderful to have those, because you can fit a lot of, larger spreadsheets and things like that, the kind of things that we traditionally do here. So I'm not really sure how the initial contact came through, but it came through to Bob Owens, and he was the one who set it up.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. All those.
Question.
Yes.
Why is the immigration office giving us computers? Like, why them? Just a quick question. It seems a bit odd, especially if we're not a district with a large number. Yeah.
There again, it's possible that they could have offered these to other districts, and maybe other districts were in a position that they weren't interested, or maybe they had just recently upgraded theirs. My understanding is that the Office of Immigration was upgrading their own systems, and so they no longer needed these particular monitors. So it just so happens that we were kind of in a shortage of monitors, or at least the widescreen version at this level. So I'm thinking they probably offered them to others as well, or would have given them to others, or maybe they had more that they did give. But I only know about the ones they actually donated to us. But the why they would choose us, I'm not really sure.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to accept the donation from the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're moving on to our discussion. So teacher appreciation week is coming up pretty soon, and we won't have another meeting between now and then. And it's important that we talk about it in the past and make a plan. In the past, we have we've written a letter, something that we would share with the district to express our thanks. In the past, we've helped participate with some of the, as members with some of the other PTOs and community groups. So I think it's important that we talk a little bit about this. The first thing that I'd like to say is that I think at this time, for this week coming up, that it's important that we broaden this from beyond just teachers and to be a full teacher and staff appreciation, especially given the circumstances. There's another time in the year, yes, when staff appreciation occurs, but it's not likely to happen before the school year ends this year. And I think that that's an important a signal from us to those are our people, that we care about them as just as much as anyone else. So so it's a discussion. So we need to talk about who has some ideas about some things that we might do. Tom, thanks.
So normally we've provided food, and I don't think that's very feasible at this point, though. I guess some teachers are coming into the school on Monday and Thursday, I think, and so maybe if there was some way we could give them small packages of chocolate or something like that, that might be a way to do it. But the other thing that I was thinking of would be if we were to take an ad out in the Addison Independent, and an ad of thanks or something like that. I'm not quite sure how much money is budgeted for this. I assume it's under $100, but I don't know.
I don't know either, but we can find out.
Okay. Any other ideas? So we've got a couple of ideas. Perhaps a way to send a signal with some food or something like that. At least a letter or card or something like that from the board, and then perhaps a letter that would be more public in Addison Independent or something like that. Any other thoughts out there?
I mean, what about a personal? Oh, Chris had his hand up. I'm cheating.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. I'm sorry, Chris. I didn't look over.
Test.
You go, Chris. I pressed the space.
Something. Can we just do something simple like put a? I have not driven anywhere in a long time, so maybe there already is. But can we put something on that board out in front of the school that says thank you to all the teachers, and just say like, what a wonderful job they're doing? I think there are some people that are still driving around that would see something like that. Seems like a good use for that sign.
I think that's like a yes, and yes, we can do that, but remember that we have 4 buildings, right? And that might seem as if we're just thanking those teachers, right? So I think it's a yes, and because I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Good one. Bill.
Yeah, just a quick, I guess, vote in favor of Tom's suggestion to do something maybe in the Addison Independent. I just think we're all feeling overwhelming gratitude for the people who are making this happen. And I mean, everybody here who's spoken has said something like that. And a lot of people in the district look at the paper. I think it's kind of, in the past, we'd line up a bunch of signs out in front of the building so when they come into work, they see it, but that's not happening now. So I just wanted to throw a little, vote in favor of Tom's idea. I think that would be great.
Cool. Una?
Yes, especially with like the K3 through 3 students who are home and most of what they do is hands-on. If we could get them to write little cards that could be posted on the district website or someplace that teachers could access them with just like little cute drawings from the kids and like, thank you. Also, I'm in favor of the Addison Independent idea as well. as the chocolate for teachers. I think those are good ones.
Any chance that Una, Alder, and Reagan can pull some students together at the high school level to be able to say thank you in some way?
Yes.
Or you don't have to say yes, just as a thought.
I'm definitely willing to. I know the Communicating School Redesign team had been talking about a letter writing campaign between teachers and students for a while now, so maybe we just start that early. Or if not, I know a few students who might be interested in writing a thank you letter.
Yeah, I mean, it's not tomorrow that it has to happen. It is early May, but something to think about. Christina.
Yeah, that ad that you're talking about for the Independent, could we place an ad in all the school newsletters too, so to speak, with a big thank you? And then maybe use social media to do that as well.
Okay. And Lori.
As far as, oh, sorry, I'm not going to jump in. Sorry.
It's okay if you want to jump in. Okay. I love the idea of putting it in the Independent. I also, if we're going to do anything related to food, chocolate, whatever, I want to keep it local. We have a chocolate shop. We could do, I don't know how much, Elizabeth, I think, was going to check to see how much money we had, if we had any, but, gift cards, a $25 gift, no, $10 gift card. Sorry. That's more than, no, never mind. That won't work. That won't work.
School districts can't buy gift cards.
We can't buy gift cards.
Okay. Okay. So we have a lot of ideas that just floated around here. At the very least, we need to write something. So I think I would like to, Martha, you want to go ahead and then I'll say what I'm going to say and then we'll wrap up this discussion. I think I have a way of wrapping it up.
Sure. We have some social media. I know there's the parent group. I also know that I think that our district has a Facebook page. There's a lot of different places, and I'm just wondering if we can put together a little video. I know some teachers, I know Middlebury's done it, Mount Abe's kind of done it for the students, but would it be possible to find someone that is willing to put together a little iMovie or something that we could possibly post as an appreciation? It's just a thought, and that's, there's a lot of people at home. Maybe we could reach out to the parent community group or the different PTOs, heads of the different schools.
So thank you. So we've got parent groups as well. All right. So I think there's like two bigger tasks here. One is, would there be a couple of members here who would be able to, maybe two, who would take on communicating with the parent groups and just making sure that they're aware of the Parent and Staff Appreciation Day coming up? And you can always connect back with me as well. Would there be a couple of people just to see like something like Martha? So Bill would be willing to do that? Okay. Bill, anybody else would be willing to join Bill for the parent groups? Amy, thank you. So Bill and Amy for the parent groups. Chris, could you please, and I can work with you about the thank you sign? Yeah, let's do that. I think that's a really good idea. Just for that week, at least say thank you. So Chris, with that. And would somebody be willing to? I can, and I will write something if I. But I'd like to save that for a minute. Somebody needs to write something, a letter, and I would do that with them. But who would be willing to write a thank you letter from the board as a first draft? So we have Mark. Anybody else? Just maybe two people.
I'll help you with that.
Mark and Keith, thank you. And then. I'd like to be in touch with Una and Reagan and Alder and myself to talk and just to learn more about what might happen with the students. Okay, and if anybody would like to work with me to do something with that.
If it comes up and there's something that you need help with, give me a shout.
Okay. Thank you. All right, good. Christina, you raised your hand.
Yes, I can help you with that. Sorry,
Okay.
I didn't unmute.
All right, Mark, you've already got a job. Christina, you're with me. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, everyone. That's important. That's an important thing. Let's move on that and see what we can do to raise some awareness and about the work that our teachers and staff are doing right now during the week of May 4th through the 8th. Thank you. Okay, so we are now moved on to the public comment. So if you wish to speak during public comment section this meeting now, please click the button labeled raise your hand, and I'll ask you to, before speaking, to please state your name and town of residence and address your remarks to me and limit your comments to 3 minutes. I'll give it just 1 minute.
It's just Stephanie and Andy on the call with Glory. So,
okay.
But can I jump in just to say one other thing?
Yes.
I hope that this isn't a confusing format, but I really want to encourage when we put the notes out next time, the registration is very simple. I know some of you ended up having to register to get into the meeting. So it's just name, town, and then you're on the list. So, I think that this is a more secure way for us to ensure that random people aren't joining the call and then are visible to the public, especially since it's being live streamed. So we just have to get people in the habit of registering so that they can be in on the call if they wish to make comment. And I know there's a number of people also watching the live stream. So I just wanted to sort of reinforce that idea. So between meetings, we can get word out to people. And I also wanted to mention that the census is going on right now. And as you know from our last meeting, that's a really important thing for us to encourage people to take part in, especially under these circumstances. I'm afraid it's going to go on the back burner for a lot of people. And then we rely on that data for the next 10 years. So it's such an important thing that people do. I mean, it's sort of not really your responsibility as a board, but I guess I just want to, as community members, encourage you to help get word out about the census.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I guess I'll take off my school board hat for a moment and just do a public comment thing.
Go for it.
I've got 3 people in my house that are involved in the school in some way, and I'm just seeing absolutely amazing things happen. Collaboration between students in breakout rooms, and a teacher doing a fantastic job, and a lot of teacher collaboration. I think these people are just doing an amazing job and have really risen to the occasion. So I just wanted to say something about that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, just I'm looking at some of the comments on the RETN site for people who are watching through Facebook, and there's some fun ideas, and they're mostly from Jeannie about ideas for recognizing people. So if you get a chance later on, take a look at that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, everyone. Look, this is our first go at it on Zoom. We're going to have some more practice later on in the week. Send me a note if you have some feedback about the way that this went. I tried to hustle us on through the agenda items, and I appreciate that. We're just going to have to, if you feel like we're not getting to the meat of the discussions of the things that we need to get to through this format, I think you need to let me know, and I'll think through that. And with that, we've come to the end of this meeting. I'm grateful to see you all. Thank you for those who were listening. Good luck to everyone out there. Thank you all and everyone. Is there a motion to adjourn, or I can't remember. I'm new too. Can I just adjourn?
Yep.
Move to adjourn.
I move to adjourn. Be well, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
John.
Bye, everybody. Take care.